My name is Paul Sigler. Right now we are all taking Core 2 Science, Non-Science, and Pseudoscience at Lakeland College. The topic I chose for my final paper and my presentation is relativism, and the author of our book kind of touched on this on the last chapter, stating that all of the information provided in the previous chapters must be true because there is only one truth, because relativism is false, which I happen to disagree with. Relativism to me sort of means that people can have their own perspective on things and different ideas on things, and that's okay. There's no absolute truth. Um, Probably the most prevalent instance of this would be Einstein's theory of relativity, and part of that says that measurements of quantities are relative to the velocity of the observer. So that's kind of tricky to get your head around. I did come up with this example to helpfully explain it. So, most people have experienced this also. So, imagine you're on the side of a street and all of a sudden an ambulance comes down the street and the ambulance has a siren on it. So when the ambulance is coming towards you in your direction, the siren has a certain pitch to it. Because the ambulance is moving at a certain speed, the sound waves get compressed a little bit when it's moving towards you, so it has this certain pitch that is there because not just the sound that the siren's giving off, but because the object is moving as well. When the ambulance is moving away from you, it also has a different pitch too, because the sound waves are coming towards you, but they're also accelerating in the opposite direction. So there's two different sounds there, and the sound that's actually created by the siren itself is the same, but in relation to where you are to the ambulance, it sounds different. And what Einstein's theory is saying is that if you wanted to hear the actual sound of the siren, you would need to be moving in the same speed and direction as the siren. So, a little bit abstract, but I think everybody can understand this. Um, this kind of brings up a few questions, though. I mean, which sound is the correct sound if there is absolutism? Obviously, they're all the same sound. If there's different people in each three of those positions, then who would be the correct person? They each heard a different sound, yet it's the same sound coming from the siren. So, relativism sort of gives a good explanation of this because it basically says everybody is true, it's just they have their own perspective on it from where they're standing. The picture I included on this slide is a little interesting. So basically, it sort of shows this at like a cosmic level. If you were sitting on the small planet in the far right and you saw light way off in the distance, you'd say, oh, that's right past that planet, when actually it's probably behind it because the light gets warped by the gravity of the planet. So it's sort of a relativism at a different scale, basically. Using this example of relativism, I would like to apply the ideas presented there towards the three mainly disputed areas of relativism, which are moral relativism, descriptive relativism, and philosophical relativism. So, moral relativism is basically what it states: relativistic moral values. People might have the same moral values, but they are relative to the person that you're talking to. Everyone has their own perspective on things. Taking this into the instance of, say, abortion or euthanasia, moral relativism would state that everyone has their own beliefs, and because it's relative, there might not be a correct side. So that's moral relativism in a nutshell. Descriptive relativism is a bit different. What that means is that if there's two groups trying to achieve a goal and their goal is the same, they may have different means to achieve that end. So relativistic part of that is how they go about doing things. So if everything was absolute, there's one way to do everything, then why would there be different means to get to the same end? You think everybody would do the same thing to get to the same place. So that's kind of descriptive relativism. And finally, philosophical relativism is sort of relativism applied to a contextual base. So the example I used for this in my paper is that imagine that it's the fall and the apple harvest has just come, and you go to an apple orchard and you pick an apple right off the tree. You take that apple down and you bite into it and you say, man, I really like apples. So in this context, you can see that the apple that you're eating is fresh. It's right off the tree. It's right during the harvest season, so maybe you have had past experiences with this time of the year that make you like apples more. So the other side to this story is that imagine you're a homeless person who hasn't eaten in a few days, and you go to a grocery store, and as I would imagine homeless people do, you start rummaging through the dumpster and you find a bag of moldy apples. You take an apple out, you look at it, and then you take a bite and you say, man, I really like apples. Well, okay, you might like apples, but the context in which you're liking apples is clearly different than the context in which the previous person was liking apples at the apple orchard. There's two different contexts there. So that's sort of how philosophical relativism plays in. The opposite of relativism, we already touched on this a bit, is absolutism. So basically what this means is that there's one truth. There's no room for error, and that everything else besides this one thing is wrong. And this is kind of the direction that science has been going in. Basically, if there was no absolutism, it would be a bad time for science. So the implications of this are accepting relativism. So if you accept it, I mean, there are no absolutes. We can't say that gravity is the same per person. Maybe you observed it differently. Maybe maybe this slide is not blue to you. Maybe it's green. I don't know. Blue is not an absolute. And the other implication is that individuality exists. I don't think with absolutism there is very much room for individuality. If there is, if there's only one truth, and you're trying to live by the truth, then there's only one way that you can live, and then there's no room for individuality. How I kind of take relativism in is that it's not about being right or wrong. It's just understanding that people have different viewpoints on the world based on who they are and what they choose to believe, and respecting that. So maybe somebody's right, or they could be right in relation to themselves, but they might not necessarily be right to you. So as I was researching this and thinking about it, it started to make a lot of sense to me that relativism is recursive. And what I mean by that is that certain individualistic, relativistic perspectives on things are built upon other relativistic perspectives on things. So I kind of built this example to sort of go over that. So imagine, if you will, that I am out on a date, and while I'm on a date, we actually ended up getting the same exact dish. So we're two different people, we're at the same restaurant at the same time, getting served by the same server, and we get the same exact food. So after we're done eating, we find out that one of us really liked the dish and that the other person didn't like the dish. So this sort of brings up a certain set of questions here. How do we know that the food was good or bad? If you ask me, of course I'm going to say the food is good, but if you ask my date, they might say it wasn't good. So, who is right, who is wrong? I would argue that we're both right. I'm right for me, and my date is right for her. But what would happen if we brought in another person? Say we made the waiter taste our dishes. Would they have a completely different perspective on the issue, even if we came to an agreement on who is right? Um, Another question would be: is it even possible to have the exact same dish? We are at the same place at the same time, but I'm sure one dish might have more seasoning than another. Is that even possible to have the same exact dish? Or is it even possible to say that saying whether the food is good or not is a valid argument? If it's good to me and it's bad to my date, but the waiter is kind of in the middle, then how can I recommend to somebody else whether the food was good or bad or not? Because I cannot predict what they will think about it. So, just some questions about that there. Taking this into a relativistic standpoint on recursion, say that the actual atmosphere in the restaurant was bad. So I'm basing the taste of the food on other stimuli in the restaurant. But if we change that to maybe, say, have some familiar music in it, or have some flowers that maybe remind you of some better time, that would change your perspective on the food because you're basing the quality of the food on other past relativistic perceptions. So, with all this in mind, if everybody is able to have their own relativistic perspective on everything, then I would argue that it's also possible for people to have the same relativistic perspectives on things. So, when this happens, we could say that the relative perspectives align. And, although they align, they might not be the same perspective because the underlying perspectives that allow that perspective to come to light may be different. So they align, but they're not necessarily the same. And with these aligning perspectives, we might consider that sort of like accepted scientific theories, say like for the constant of gravity or whatnot. And we can use this sort of to apply it towards everything that we've gone over in this class. So, say that I have a friend who has seen Bigfoot. I have another friend that has seen a UFO. It could be real to them that they actually seen it. Science may or may not be able to prove it. There might not be any evidence. I might not believe it, but it still could be very real to them that they saw that, and it could be very unreal to me that they didn't see it. So, that in and of itself proves relativism to me, and there is no real right or wrong way to look at these types of things. So, with all this in mind, I would like to just leave you guys with this last thought. This quote from Alice in Wonderland. Basically, I like how this applies towards relativism because whatever path you decide to go on, it depends on where you're going to go. So it's all relative. And I think that really fits in nice. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. And I hope you guys enjoyed this class as much as I did. Thanks.